thanks very much for taking the time to come along today to find out a little bit more about the Autumn funding round. My name is Francis Shaw, and I'm Director of Operations here at the Fore. So I sort of very much look after the grant giving program and our wider partnership work. And I'm joined today by Catherine Marks. Hi, Catherine, who is one of our strategic applicant consultants, which is a bit of a mouthful. So from here on in, we'll say SACs. Um, and I'll introduce Catherine in a little bit and ask her a couple of questions. And then basically we can get stuck in. But essentially, I'm not going to do a presentation or anything like that today. It's very much just give you a bit of an overview about, very brief overview about the Fore, about the funding round, the key dates in the process, and essentially let's use this time for you to ask any specific questions you have so that sort of you feel like you need answers to be able to move forward in the process. So basically, kick off, really easy one. Who is the Fore? You might know us, you might not know us, but basically the Fore, we are the only venture philanthropy fund in the UK dedicated to backing the best small charities and social enterprises. And our goal is to get essentially exceptional solutions from grassroots to nationwide impact within 5 years. And the main vehicle for doing that is for backing small charities and social enterprises to give them the funding and wider skills support that they need to be able to sort of scale up, grow, transform, and truly unlock their full potential. Um, so we have today just opened our autumn 2025 funding round. And in terms of how that process works, we're currently open for registrations, and that basically means you can register your interest to apply. And essentially how that works is there's a very short online form. It asks for very, very basic questions. It literally shouldn't take any more than a couple of minutes to fill out, just sort of the name of your organization, registration number, things like that. Um, and essentially, yeah, so idea 2 to 3 minutes max. And then the registration period is open from midday today, which is the 22nd, until midday next Tuesday, which is the 29th of July. And then basically what happens on next Wednesday, the 30th of July, is anyone who has registered will be emailed with confirmation on whether or not they have been allocated a place on the funding round. And I should say the number of places available is directly dictated by the amount of fundraising we have been able to do for that specific round. We don't sit on an endowment, so like a lot of you, we're out there fundraising. So very often, unfortunately, what happens is we're not able to invite all those that have registered to apply to submit an application. As I said, it's dictated by the amount of fundraising that we've been able to do. So then if you are then invited to submit an application on the 30th of July, what happens next is you'll go off, you'll prep that application, and you'll get it in for the deadline of 5 o'clock on Monday, the 8th of September. So you'll have a good chunk of the summer to sort of get stuck into that. And essentially, the application, it's not death by questions. It's essentially, we don't have an application form. All we ask is that you basically send us something that's no more than 3 A4 pages. And on the website, you can go and have a look. I won't sort of rattle through all of that now, but there's some specific things that we ask you to give us in those 3 pages. So, tell us a bit about your leadership. What is it you want the money for? What impact do you think the money will have? And we'll also ask you to give us a bit of information on 3 years of historic finance data, if you've been around for 3 years, and also 3 years forecasted, so we can get a sense of how our funding will sort of help change your finance makeup going forward, really. And in terms of the sort of stuff that we're looking at in those application forms when they're received on the 8th of September, we look at two things: the strength of leadership and the transformational impact. So we'll be looking at the strength of leadership. We appreciate, small charities and social enterprises by their very nature. There will be capacity constraints. People will be short-staffed. That's absolutely fine. But we're looking at how our funding can kind of help you unlock those problems that you're facing that is stopping you from sort of growing or becoming more financially sustainable. And that is the sort of transformational impact element. And there's a lot of different examples, some examples of transformational impact could be an organization that is entirely volunteer led and now wants to bring in its first full-time delivery role. So, for example, the funding could be for a delivery officer, with the idea being that the delivery officer comes in, takes over the day-to-day delivery of programs or services for the organization, and that then frees up, the volunteer leaders to focus on strategy development, income diversification, and scale up. So that's kind of just a little example of what transformational impact looks like. And then in terms of what happens after the 8th of September, we have a couple of different stages in the process. So stage one is the initial review. So our strategic applicant consultants will review all of the applications that they've received, and they will essentially decide to shortlist and bring 30% of those through to stage two. And those that don't go beyond stage one will receive bespoke written feedback on the application to sort of essentially tease out why you weren't successful on this occasion. We think that's really, really important because we've noticed that actually the vast majority of organizations that we actually fund have applied to us at least once before, and they've taken that feedback on board, applied, and come back sort of more funder support ready the next time around. And then with the 30% of organizations that do make it through to stage two, you will have a 45-minute, 1 hour long chat with your designated SAC, like Catherine. And essentially, as part of that process, it will be to kick the tires on your proposal. We're definitely not expecting perfection, but just to understand the proposal a bit more, to sort of ask you any questions that the SAC might have on the application. But it's much broader than that as well. I think a nice way to see it is, essentially 45 minutes of strategic advice on your organization. Our SACs will be able to advise you on things, or they might say, oh, it's great that you were thinking, for example, you want to bring in a fundraiser to support your fundraising and income generation. But actually, from chatting to you as the leader, we think you actually would be great at doing that fundraising. You've had a bit of success in the past. We can clearly see that you're a good fundraiser. So have you thought about, for example, rather than bringing in a fundraiser, you're spending tons of time on delivery. Why don't you bring in that delivery person so you can focus on the fundraising yourself? Because it can be quite difficult to find a good fundraiser. So I think that's just a bit of an example of sort of kicking the tires on your approach and whether it's the right thing for you and the organization. Ultimately, you will of course know your organization far better than our SAC. So anything obviously that we say can only ever be a recommendation. But we know that people find that sort of more strategic, high level advice point quite helpful in the process as well. So yeah, just to recap, no matter what stage of the process you get to, you will walk away with bespoke feedback. And then essentially that stage two process is like a bit of a funnel. So gradually, by the end of the stage two process, the strategic applicant consultant will have a short list of who they think should be taken forward to the funding panel to make the case for funding. And then what happens is the strategic applicant consultant will sit down with me or one of my colleagues, and we'll sort of work out who to take forward to panel and who perhaps isn't ready just yet, and what further bespoke feedback we can give so that if they do apply again in the future, they do get hopefully to that panel stage if they action that feedback. So yeah, so I feel like that's a very whistle-stop tour of the whole process. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's all online and you can sort of read it and sort of reflect back when you need to. As I say, I really want to use this time for you to ask as many questions as you like. So before we get stuck in, because Catherine will probably be taking the lion's share of the questions around transformational impact, or I want to apply to do X, Y, and Z. Does that sound okay to you? Let's introduce you to Catherine. So yeah, so thanks so much, Catherine, for coming along. Catherine has been working as an SAC with us for a few rounds now, and a very good and safe pair of hands. And yeah, I just thought, Catherine, do you maybe just before we get stuck in, maybe because our strategic applicant consultants have very different backgrounds, some have come from the charitable sector, private sector, some a bit of both. Do you maybe just want to say a bit about your own background, Catherine, and how you ended up here with us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Francis, and thanks for inviting me along because yeah, this is one of the best parts of it to talk to great organisations. So yeah, happy to hear your questions shortly. So yeah, as Francis mentioned, I'm a strategic applicant consultant here and have done a few rounds now. My background is actually more in the corporate world. So I worked in corporate finance for about 20 years. I'm a little bit unusual in that I'm going through a bit of a career shift at the moment. So I'm currently studying a master's degree in philanthropy and working with a number of non-profit and grant-making organisations alongside the work that I'm doing with the Fore. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Lovely, Catherine. And yeah, I think, we obviously love having SACs that bring that charitable sector experience, but it's also nice to have SACs that come from other sectors as well, because I feel like they can bring fresh insights and perspectives. But also equally, it's a two-way street. I think the SACs that fall into that category can walk away from with really useful learning and insight from the charitable sector as well. So it kind of works both ways, which is really, really nice. So I suppose, Catherine, kind of thinking of the rhymes you've done. I mean, I'm sure you enjoy everything about being on a round, but if you had to pick one thing, what do you reckon, the thing you enjoy most about working on a round is?
Oh, it's hard to pick one thing. And obviously, I love seeing funding going to great organizations. I love the opportunity to speak to these great organizations and hear about your work. But I think probably what feels most important to me is engaging with that grant making process. It's challenging. Let's not pretend it's all plain sailing, and there's funding freely available to give everyone. So it's really important that we reflect on how we do things, and yeah, what both parties get from the experience. As Francis mentioned, we think it's really important to give you feedback along the way. I'm also always open to hearing the feedback that comes into us. And Francis is probably very sick of hearing from me sharing all that feedback, but I do, because it's really important that we do that and continue to reflect. So I really value that about working with the Fore and seeing some of the changes, positive changes put into place.
Brilliant, Catherine. Thanks so much. And then I suppose before we get stuck into questions from you guys, I suppose one of the things that we look for is transformational impact. And I feel like, uh, a lot of applicants can sometimes struggle to understand what that means. And I think the challenge is, it can mean different things to different organizations depending where they're at. So we're reluctant to put, too many examples on it. But I suppose, Catherine, for you, when you're looking at applications, what do you look for in terms of transformational impact?
Yeah, as you said, it is very different for every organization. So it is tricky to be really specific. It's about what it means for you. I think it's worth saying that this isn't specifically about your beneficiaries. Now, it's not that we don't care about your beneficiaries. We know that you do. We know that you know what your organization needs, and how that can then deliver better, more impact to your beneficiaries. This is about the impact on your organization. So whether that be in terms of growth, structure, sustainability, efficiency, what does this funding unlock for you as an organization? And I think the best applications are those that are authentic, clear, straightforward, yeah, really clear in terms of their strategy. So almost, advice that I give quite often is imagine that you're explaining this to a child. What is it that that this funding does for you? What does it unlock for you? What's your organization going to look like after this funding has been received, and why is that important?
Lovely, Catherine. Thanks. That's so helpful. I was going to say I wish we'd recorded that, but we have, so that's good. Um, so yeah, so I feel like that's enough from us for now. So I think, yeah, we want to take it away. And if people want to ask any questions, by all means, they can be very sort of processy. They can be more sort of strategic and high level. Just, yeah, if you've got a question, just put your hand up and we'll do our best to answer it, really. Ishan.
Hi, thank you for scheduling this call seminar. I run Travel Hands. It's an Uber-like service for visually impaired people to get around with volunteers in London. We applied once, and this is the feedback we got, that the application didn't really cover the transformational side of it, and that was a lack in the application. So my question is, if my understanding is still right or not, we don't really have a marketing person in the team, and we wish to have someone on board who would help us in marketing the values of the charity. So having salary paid from this grant for a marketing person and to scale further, would that be considered?
I mean, I think definitely in principle, that is definitely a funding ask that we would fund. But Catherine, did you maybe just thinking of Ishan applying, are there certain things that you think you would be looking out for in the application to sort of make sure you get a full understanding of how it's transformational?
Yeah, I think so. To build on what I said before, I think it's really about telling that story. So whilst, yeah, it is, as we said, very different for every organization. In this case, you're talking about a marketing person, and that's what you need in your organization. But
Yeah.
why? What's the story around that? What's that marketing person going to bring? How does that allow you as an organization to grow, or whatever it is? And does everything in the application, is it consistent with that? So as an example, sometimes people will talk about whatever the specific need is, whether that was a marketing person or something else, because they want to, I don't know, diversify an income stream, for example. And yeah, they want to be able to grow, and I don't know what it is, expand into a new service or a new geography, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you might look at the financials table and it's the story is not consistent. And I appreciate that sometimes people feel, oh, the future funding isn't secured, so I don't feel confident to put that in. But my advice there is to find the right balance. We want to see that ambition, we want to see the story, we want to see what that marketing person in this instance, what that does for you as an organization, and beyond.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, Ishan, I noticed that seems to happen a lot when there is a request for a marketing role is we ask you in the application form, as you'll know, to put in specific targets that you will try to meet over the lifetime of the grant. And I think very often what can happen in the marketing applications is the targets seem to sort of focus largely on number of beneficiaries. So, we will reach an extra 10,000 beneficiaries as a result. And I think where it tends to fall down there, and I think this is the acid test, is that's very beneficiary focused. But what about your sort of linking to what Catherine says, the long-term financial resilience and sustainability? Because actually, great that you have this marketing person now, but once the Fore's funding ends, do you sort of revert back to the way you were before, or have you put something in place? So I think in the targets, and I really can't stress that enough, we do care about the beneficiaries, but that is almost the sort of byproduct of the transformation on the organization, is that you can support more and you can support them sustainably. So in terms of the targets, if the marketing person is there to drive up new corporate partnerships or new whatever, bring that out. And also if you are thinking, you know, if anyone's thinking about for example, the marketing example of, and maybe in that marketing example, it is about new corporate partnerships, or maybe it's freeing up staff time for new corporate partnerships. Again, just whatever you can include in the application to show the feasibility of you getting more corporates, because obviously everybody wants more corporates because of the sort of state of the grant giving sector. That actually, you know, have you had warm leads? Have you put the feelers out? Are they there, but you just haven't been able to tap into them. So it's kind of taking it an extra level as well. Appreciate it, Ishan. I don't know the specifics of yours, but that's just a couple of other bits that I sort of see where applicants sometimes can stumble.
Yeah. Can I follow up if it's
Yeah,
okay?
sure.
So how we work is we provide help to visually impaired people by matching them with volunteers in a Uber-like manner. So we have 350 VIP beneficiaries. By VIP, I mean visually impaired people, and volunteers are our people. So we match them basically in a Uber-like fashion, and we have 100 volunteers. But the demand's increasing, and we're trying our best to advertise and get more people to become volunteers, but we cannot. So we need help. We need to hire someone who really understands this and helps us get that so we can scale further, because with the demand we are not able to like supply with the volunteer side, and probably that's what we're looking to get help.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would throw in there then, and Catherine, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but you know, also think, do you need a volunteer management function as well in the mix? Maybe not, because maybe that's something that you've already got in hand. But I suppose, Catherine, I think one of the things you might be looking for in that case is, great, you've got the volunteers in, but how do you manage them best as well? But yeah, just an
Yeah.
extra thought from me.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be thinking exactly that. Yeah, who's going to manage that, or have we thought about that? Maybe you already have. That's really
Yeah,
clear.
we have that.
Brilliant. Great.
So I
And
would
then,
I would
oh,
bring that out in the story, and also, you know, thinking a little bit about tech, and you know, this isn't that you necessarily have to have some fancy all singing dancing bespoke technology. That's not what I'm suggesting here. I know that's not the nature of you know, the kinds of organizations that are applying to the Fore, but have you thought about you know, how that can help you as well as part of that story?
brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Catherine. And then Hannah, and then Evie, I see you've got your hand up as well. I'll come to you after too.
Hi there, this is Hannah. We've just started a very small CRC. It's called Thrive Social Capital, and we deal with marginalised ethnic minority communities, helping them in terms of training, upskilling, employability. Now, my question to you would be in terms of financials. Obviously, you do need the 3 years of financials in order to tell the story, to see where the funding is going to be allocated, so on and so forth. From my perspective, would it be worth it for us to even potentially think about applying this year, or would it be more beneficial for us to take the year off and perhaps when we have the financials in place, perhaps to apply next year?
No, I would say no, Hannah. I mean, I think you can obviously only submit 3 years of historic financials if you have them, which you don't.
Mhm.
And if you don't, that's fine. I think in that case, we'd be more interested in your 3 years of forecasted financials as a result of
Yeah.
whatever transformation the Fore is unlocking. And I think, Catherine, maybe in that case, would we be looking for the latest set of management accounts or something that you can get a sense of the sort of current state of the finances?
Yeah, potentially that could be helpful, but again, I'd go
Mhm.
back to the overall story, because I know, you know, Francis the Fore as a funder is happy to be a very early funder. It's not that you
Yeah.
have to have a huge track record, but then, you know, why we've touched on strength of leadership, for example. Why are you the right people to be doing this? What is the expertise, the strengths that you bring as a leadership team as part of this story? So I'd very much focus on those things as well. And yeah, if there are sort of management accounts potentially, or just sort of other threads of the story that you can touch on to bring that to life, and give examples, that's also really helpful.
That's really massively beneficial. Thank you so much. I'll definitely keep that in mind, just because we do have the support of this community, the city, universities and everything. So we're a very solid organisation, which is the financials that are lacking for rightful reason, just because of the fact that we're so new. So we'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you so much for the response. Appreciate it.
Lovely, Hannah.
No problem. I think just to add to that, sort of, yeah, all of those things that you just mentioned, not everyone sort of focuses on them and brings them to life. So yeah, doing that in your application makes it stand out. And yes, appreciate you don't have a track record, but showing that you've credibly thought through what the forecast years will look like. And I'm going to sound like a stuck record coming back to the story, and yeah, why you think about things like that, and yeah, telling that through the financial forecasts as well as the rest of your application is really useful and important.
Lovely. Thanks, Catherine. And then Evie.
Hello, let me just lower my hand there. Yeah, so my name's Evie and I work for the Lincolnshire Community and Voluntary Partnership. So we exist to support the community and voluntary sector across Lincolnshire. So I'm kind of asking my questions on behalf of some charities and groups and organisations that I support, and then would signpost them to apply for your funding. So if you've got a new charity that started, what would you suggest that they could do to kind of strengthen their applications without having that history, like letters of recommendation or surveys?
Yeah, Catherine.
I think, I'd go back to the previous answer, particularly talking about the strength of leadership and why they're the right team. Yes, if there are surveys, anything that points towards what the organization is all about, and yeah, what this group of people can bring to solving the problem. It's also worth knowing that we, for those who get later in the process, we do ask to speak to referees. Although we wouldn't do that sort of at the application stage. Yeah, just to let you know that we do ask for that later, so you could think about who those individuals would be. That's entirely up to you. It might be another funder or someone that the organisation has worked with in some capacity, and that really does sort of just add more colour. It's just a short chat with me or the other strategic applicant consultants like me, but it gives us another lens, a bit more depth to the application.
And is there any sector that you would look for particular, or you'd allow all charities if they're like in community transport, heritage, animals, children? Is there anything that's kind of...
No, I mean, we've got our sort of 4 funding themes are really, really broad, so you would be hard pushed. We've never had anything come in where we thought, oh, this doesn't fit into any of our criteria, so I wouldn't worry about that at all, Evie.
Okay. And are there any common mistakes that you see in applications that people should avoid?
Catherine, I think that's one for you.
We got they are easily avoidable. We get so many great applications. That's the downside of this, is we can't fund everybody, of course. But yeah, really focusing on these 2 things. I know we keep going on about it, but that's exactly what I'm looking for when I pick up the applications. Strength of leadership, transformational impact, and transformational impact be on the organization, not the beneficiaries. Of course, it's okay to talk about your beneficiaries. That's what you're here for. But when we're talking about the transformational impact, that's sort of a knock-on impact. It's secondary to the organization. So yeah, really stress the emphasis on the organisation. You know, as Francis said, it's not about cause. You know, when I review each of the applications, not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for clarity. You know, is this organisation clear on what it wants to do with that funding and where it's going to leave them afterwards? That's the most important thing.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, that's my.
And I think I can go for a more basic example of common pitfalls, which is very, very basic, but organizations not sticking to the 3-page limit and going on to 4 or 5. And it's a bit frustrating because some of the requests are fantastic, but actually, you know, when you're trying to assess a whole batch for the sake of fairness, you know, we can't prioritize someone who's had a lot more information included. And just the other really simple thing is, before you submit the application to us, just go back onto the website and tick off that you've included the things that we asked to include. Because again, if that's missing, it means we only get part of the story. So you're already sort of starting off with a disadvantage for something that could easily be avoided. Really simple ones.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. And then Jordan.
Hello. This is kind of just going off a really good question that's been asked in the chat by somebody as well. They've mentioned things about like videos being used alongside your application, or does it all have to be text-based and stuff? Because we find that sometimes, especially with things like the transformational things, we've got so much like video evidence, or in our building, if people can come and visit and stuff to see what we do and things like that. I kind of just want a little bit of clarification on that type of thing, because I think they make an excellent point, being that some people do struggle with wording applications correctly when you might be ticking all the boxes, but it's just not worded that way. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and while I'm just also, Jordan, just going to read that comment as well, just so I have the full context. Just take 1 second. I mean, what I would say is, I feel like we absolutely would be more than happy to take videos, but I think more from the perspective if it was for accessibility reasons. So just, for example, if just writing an application just didn't work for whatever accessibility reason, you know, we're very, very flexible. And if you fall into that category, absolutely come to us and we can work out a way to get your application in that works. I would say the only thing about videos in general, about if it's not for accessibility reasons, I guess it's really difficult, because then I think you're putting it onto the SAC to try and see, because to try and sort of articulate and convey something visually. And I think if you can't do it, it will be really difficult for them to do it as well. And what I would also say is, and I really can't stress this enough, the application doesn't need to be perfect. We're looking for potential, and you know, that's why we speak to 30% of the applicants on the phone. And I think what I would also say, and Catherine, maybe you'll disagree, but certainly from my perspective, very often when I look at an organization that's got funding with us and I go back and I look at the application form, I go, oh, okay. I mean, I feel like the proposal at panel was amazing, but actually the application form was really quite rough around the edges. So it just shows that we are happy to work with you to get it to a point. But I think, yeah, it comes back to that point that I think it'll be very difficult for the SAC to articulate that. And if they've got a batch of maybe, I don't know, 30 or something like that, they also might not have the time. But I mean, Catherine, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or sort of easy ways to articulate, or yeah, magic wand if there is one. I don't know.
I don't have one of those. I do agree with what you said. Of course, if there's an accessibility point, then that's absolutely fine to use videos. I would say on the whole, though, I would really try to limit that, especially at the stage 1 part of the process, where, so this time around, I reviewed, for example, about 70 applications. It takes a long time. And actually, you know, if you're starting to layer in videos as well, I'm quite unlikely, unless there's, as I said, if there's an accessibility issue, that's different. Otherwise, I'm quite unlikely to be diving into videos. And I know that it's a challenge sometimes to put things into words. That is the challenge that you have. And that's where then those stage 2 conversations are really helpful to help bring things to life a little bit more. And I'd be more likely, I think, you know, once we got further in the process, a video might be helpful. So if they're, you know, to the extent that you have videos that are already existing, it would be at that point of the process that I might jump in, and, you know, that would help me even more by the point that we got to a funding panel. So it's not a, you know, no way, never, but also, you know, don't sort of invest lots of time making videos for the early part of the process, unless there's an accessibility reason. Because yeah, I'm unlikely to look at them at that stage.
And I would also say, you know, think of tools like ChatGPT and Gemini. I'm not saying get them to write the application for you, and obviously think of the environmental impact as well of that and use it sparingly. But, you know, I think ChatGPT, for example, I know for me, sometimes at the fore where I feel like I'm trying to describe a bit of our process that has so many different bits hanging off of it, and it can feel a bit overwhelming. Actually, just chucking it into ChatGPT and saying, these are all the strands. Can you kind of have a go at pulling this together into sort of something shorter and something a bit more logical? It can really help, because it's not in the thick of it. So yeah, so it can kind of see the wood through the trees, really.
Amazing, thank you.
No worries, Jordan. And then Fran. Oh, Fran, I think you're on mute.
Sorry.
There you go.
Nearly all the transformational impact things that you've mentioned involve employing people. Now, we are a fully volunteer-run organisation, and we don't want to employ anybody. We don't want to take on the responsibility almost of all that comes with it. Does that sort of pretty much put us out the ballpark?
No, not at all. And Catherine, I wonder, maybe is it, you could maybe give a couple of examples of ones you've seen recently where it wasn't actually to employ anyone?
That's a good
Maybe
question.
CRM system, I suppose, is a good example that we see.
Yeah, CRM systems, other types of systems, so monitoring and evaluation. I've seen that come up before. So yeah, various different types of tech that would help you in some way. Or I mean, do you already have an idea, Fran, in your mind of what you would want that funding to go towards? And don't worry if you don't want to answer that. I've put you on the spot, but just to help me with my thinking.
We are planting woods around the town here. We have 3 major sites, and we are trying to buy a new piece of land, and obviously that then takes a lot of money to develop it. And just because this is on the horizon, and I've gone back into looking at where we're going to find some money, you know, we do these things, and I hadn't come across the Fore before. So I've come along to see what you are. I don't think it's going to be right for us. It certainly won't be right for, I'm not talking about this round, but just trying to increase my knowledge of funding that is out there. But I don't think that what we want to do would probably come under your sort of remit. Because I can, unless we go away and think that we probably could do with some of this more strategic planning and all the rest of it, we do tend to sort of go on from, we've been going for 20 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do it quite successfully and we raise money quite successfully. But I think that, as I say, basically you are looking at major changes, often with staffing.
Yeah, well, I would say, yeah, and I would say often it just happens to be that I think for a lot of organizations, staffing is the way to bring about the major change. But
Yeah.
definitely, you know, bringing in, we've seen consultants come in to review systems and processes and, you know, set up safeguarding protocols and sort of proper sort of operational structures as well. But I suppose for you, Fran, and I think that's the value of sessions like this, because you can come along and ask these questions. I think if it's to buy, you know, if you wanted to buy land to have, and there wasn't a kind of angle of, okay, well, yeah, we wanted to buy this land because we have this plan to use the land in a certain way to allow us to go off and support people to do X, Y, and Z, or then maybe it isn't for you.
No, I mean, we've got the money for the land. It's just that the development of it will be, you know, which we can get other grants for. I just looking at what might be available from here.
And if you know,
but if we ever decide to go on a staffing type thing, then it would be worth
or if you wanted to develop it in a way and you wanted the community to start using it in a certain way and you needed support with kind of supporting that function of it to grow and scale, then I think that's a different game. So it might be that it's not right now, but actually it's
useful to know
after.
Okay, thank you.
I think the litmus test is really, you know, is this sort of BAU for you as a charity? It's not a question of whether it's for staffing versus something else, but it is about, is this about that transformational change in your organization? So I think the examples that Francis gave were really useful. But yeah, if this is sort of BAU, you're not trying to generate a change in the organization, then that's not aligned with what the Fore's look to do.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. And then Sue, I'll come to you in a second. I can just see there's a couple of questions in the chat and I want to get some of those as well. So Sophie has asked, how many grantees get funding for 3 years versus 1 year? And is that up to 45k over 3 years? Are up to 45k time. So basically the way we do it, the 45k can be spread over the whole 3 years. So you might want to do, I don't know, 21 year, 20 the next year, 5 the next year. I just did that because that's the easiest math for me to give in the example. But in terms of the split, well, number one, we've only increased our grant threshold to 45k in this funding round. It used to be 30. And what we were finding definitely with the 30 is, I would say, a good 90% plus were applying for the full 30k, because obviously 30k nowadays doesn't get you what it got back in 2017 or whatever like that. And I think in terms of the split between 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, I think it's pretty mixed. And I think it just kind of depends on what the organization needs. So I wouldn't really care, and I wouldn't let that guide you in any way. Just do what you think is right for you, because we don't care about that. And if, for example, we thought that you hadn't got the split quite right, or it could be refined, you know, if this strategic applicant consultant saw a lot of potential in terms of transformational impact, when they were chatting to you at that stage 2, that's when they would be able to say, oh, have you thought about, rather than splitting this over 3 years, why don't you just do it over 1 year or something like that? Hope that helps. And then I'll crack on with the other ones in the chat after, but back to you, Sue. Do you want to ask your question now?
Yeah, hello everybody. Thanks very much. I'm sorry if this is actually on the website and I haven't spotted it yet. But you said that after the deadline that was the initial review and then stage 2 and stage 3. So could you just enlighten me as to what stage 4 is and then what the lead time would be to be making a decision?
Yeah, so basically what happens is, once you go through that little funnel at stage 2, and sort of depending on how far you get along, you know, you might have a really great chat with the SAC at the start of that stage 2 process, but then actually there's something that's insurmountable for this grant round that you sort of need to go away and hopefully take that on board and come next time. But basically the whole timeline in terms of how that all pans out, stage 2 sort of kicks off probably towards, not sure off the back of my head, but I'd say the back end, or at least from the last 2 weeks of September. And then basically you'll go through that sort of funnel and you'll be taken through, depending on how far along you get. And then the funding panels themselves will take place in November. And just in terms of how the funding panels work, it will be basically, you wouldn't be coming along to the funding panel. We basically, the SAC does all the heavy lifting there with our partners, and they'll take the questions and all of that. And then basically within a week, 2 weeks max after the funding panel, well, number one, we'll let you know the outcome right after the panel. And within a week, 2 weeks max, we'll be following up with you to do the due diligence for the finance checks and all of that. So basically, you would have, the money would be in your account by December, really.
And that money is all in one go, or is it a drawdown method?
No, whatever works for you. It can be spread over
Okay.
3 years. So you could have it all in one go if that works, or you can have it over 2 years or 3 years. Lovely.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for your answer.
No problem, Sue. And then Rosie, possibly your answer, Catherine, focus on the organisation, is an answer to this. Can you tell us more about your focus on marginalised groups? Catering for such groups is not our main focus, but we are linked with marginalised groups, and we take steps to ensure we are inclusive of groups who don't normally take part in activities. Should our application and work under the fund focus at all on these aspects? This would obviously take focus away from our main aim, which is to make the organisation itself more sustainable and better networked. What do you think about that one, Catherine?
I mean, what I'm looking for when I review the applications is that transformational impact and strength of leadership. So I think for things that are less core to your story, it's not critical to mention everything. You've got 3 pages. We are very tough on that. So yeah, I would keep it focused on the most important points. And that doesn't mean that you have to sort of tick every single box and have the perfect application. It's much more about us understanding who is this organization, who are the leadership team, what do they bring to it, what do they want to do with this funding, and yeah, how does that make them stronger, more sustainable, growing, whatever it may be as an organization. Would you add anything else to that, Francis?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, and it's just remembering, you do only have 3 pages, so just sort of choose wisely with what you want to put in there, I suppose. Lovely. And it looks like that's all the questions in the chat. And 10:02 now, I just want to check, did anybody else have any other questions? And if you come off and you think, oh no, I wish I had have asked a question about X, just get in touch on info@, and we'll get back to you within a couple of days anyway. So this isn't the only opportunity to ask us questions. We're very approachable. Lovely. Okay, well, Catherine, thank you so much for coming along and doing this. And also everyone else, thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to come and find out a little bit more about us. And if you do decide to register and you're then invited to apply, just wishing you very best of luck with it all.